The rain poured down in sheets, but 8-year-old Maya didn't pack up her lemonade stand. Every 25-cent cup was a countdown. Her father had 72 hours before his wrongful arrest became a permanent conviction, and she was $746 short of his bail. Then, a black SUV slowed to a stop, and the man inside was the one judge in the city who could change everything. This is Maya. For 3 days, she's been out here on this suburban curb, a small girl against a vast and indifferent system. Her father, Marcus, a home health aide, is in a cell 40 minutes away, jailed after a terrified neighbor misidentified him during a burglary. The evidence is thin, but the process is grinding forward. And now, the man with the power to delay or dismiss his case entirely is watching her from his car window, holding a $5 bill for a cup of lemonade. Judge Arlen Williams had seen desperate maneuvers before. Notes slipped to his clerk, pleas from weeping relatives in hallways, but a child selling lemonade in a storm to free her father. This was a new kind of calculus. He'd noticed the stand 2 days prior on his commute home, a flash of yellow poncho against the gray rain. It struck him as quaint, a summer ritual stubbornly out of season. Tonight, something made him look closer. The sign wasn't just scrawled with lemonade. Beneath the running ink, he could make out the words, "Help free my dad." And the price, 25 cents. His wipers thumped a steady rhythm as he watched her. She wasn't just selling. She was campaigning, waving at every passing car with a fierce, hopeful energy that the weather hadn't dampened. Then she'd slump back on her stool, her small shoulders rounding with a fatigue no 8-year-old should know. He'd been a judge in this county's criminal court for 18 years. He'd presided over thousands of cases. The machinery of justice, he knew, was not built for nuance. It processed people. And sometimes it processed the wrong ones. He pulled over. Inside the warm, silent cabin of his SUV, the case file for State v. Marcus Johnson materialized in his mind. A residential burglary on the South Side. A frightened elderly victim, Mrs. Evelyn Green, who'd picked Marcus out of a photo array. The responding officers had noted Marcus's protest. He'd been at work at the assisted living facility across town. His alibi was a time card and the word of a supervisor. Against a positive ID, it was tissue paper. He'd been denied bail at first. Then, after a habeas hearing, it was set at $10,000, standard for the charge, an impossible sum. Marcus Johnson had no prior record. He was a home health aide, a single father. The public defender's motion to reduce bail had landed on Judge Williams's desk yesterday. He'd skimmed it, noted the defendant's clean history, and penciled it in for review next week. Procedure. Now he looked at the girl shivering behind her cardboard stand, her eyes locked on his car with a desperate, terrifying hope. This was the clean history. This was the single father. Maya watched the black SUV with the tinted windows. For a second, her heart leapt. A customer. Then it sank again. Rich people in nice cars never stopped. They just stared. She adjusted the pink bead at the end of one braid, a nervous habit. Her tally sheet, protected in a Ziploc bag, said she'd made $38.75 in 3 days. The bail bondsman had said they needed 10%, $1,000. She had 38. The math was a crushing, impossible mountain. Her daddy had been gone for 6 days. The worst 6 days. The first night, a nice lady from Child Services had stayed with her until her aunt could drive in from 2 towns over. Her aunt had to go back to her own job and kids. So Maya stayed with Ms. Miller next door, who was kind but old and couldn't help with the bail money. "You fight with facts, baby," her daddy always said when she struggled with homework. Numbers don't lie, so she'd fought. She listened to the adults talk. $1,000, 10% of 10,000. She emptied her glittery unicorn bank, $42. She'd set up her stand. Lemonade was 25 cents at the store. She could make 12 gallons with her money. If she sold every cup at 25 cents, she'd done the math on a napkin. 768 cups, almost 800 people. In 3 days, she'd had maybe 30 customers. The rain had scared away the rest. The door of the SUV opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, holding a briefcase over his head against the rain. He walked toward her, not hurried, his shoes making soft splashes in the growing puddles. He wasn't smiling. He looked serious, like the principal. Maya stood up straight, wiping her wet hands on her poncho. "A cup, please," the man said, his voice deep and calm. He held out a $5 bill. Maya's eyes went wide. I don't have change for that, sir." Her voice was small against the drumming rain. "Keep it," he said. She fumbled with the cooler lid, her cold fingers clumsy. She poured a cup, her hand shaking, and passed it to him. "Thank you," she whispered. He took the cup but didn't drink. He looked at her sign, then at her. "Maya." She nodded, suddenly afraid. How did he know her name? "My name is Judge Williams. I'm familiar with your father's situation." He said it carefully, like he was choosing each word. "This is a lot of responsibility for you to take on." "I have to," Maya said, the words tumbling out. "He didn't do it. He was at work. They have a clock. He's good. He helps old people get dressed and eat." Her throat tightened. "He wouldn't steal." Judge Williams felt something prickle at the back of his neck. It was the conviction in her voice. Not a child's blind faith, but a certainty built on knowing a man's character. He heard it every day from defense attorneys, from families. Usually it was noise. This felt different. This was a little girl in a poncho, selling lemonade in a downpour. "The lady who said she saw him," Maya continued, her brow furrowed as she recited facts she'd clearly heard and clung to. "She's almost 90. Her eyes aren't good. My daddy wears glasses to read. The man she described didn't wear glasses." She looked up at him, a challenge in her eyes. "Doesn't that matter?" It was a detail. A small, potentially critical detail that might have been buried in a police report if it was recorded at all. Eyewitness misidentification. The single greatest cause of wrongful convictions. He knew the stat by heart. It played a role in nearly 70% of exonerations. He looked from this fierce, dripping wet child back to his car, to the dry, orderly world of his courtroom where such details were reduced to footnotes in a procedural march. He placed the full cup of lemonade on her stand. "It should matter," he said, more to himself than to her. "The system's failure was abstract until it stood before you, shivering in a yellow poncho." He turned to go, then stopped. He reached into his wallet again. He pulled out all the cash he had, a few 20s, someone's, and placed it under the lemonade cup. "It's not charity," he said, preempting the protest he saw forming on her lips. "It's an investment in a very compelling argument." Maya stared at the money. It was more than she'd made all week. "Thank you," she breathed. "Get out of this rain soon, Maya," Judge Williams said. He walked back to his car, his mind already racing, the gears of habit disengaging. He didn't drive home. He turned his car toward the courthouse, his downtown office. The procedural review of the bail reduction could wait for the paperwork, but the detail about the glasses, that couldn't. Back in his chambers, he pulled the thin file for State v. Marcus Johnson. He read it again, slowly this time. Not as a judge managing a docket, but as if seeing it for the first time. The victim's statement: a tall, thin black man in a dark hoodie. No mention of facial hair, tattoos, glasses. The photo array: 6 men of similar build. Marcus Johnson, in his DMV photo, wore his signature thick-rimmed glasses. The officer's notes on the identification: victim expressed 70% confidence. 70%, not certainty. He picked up the phone and called the public defender, Lisa Gutierrez. It was after hours. She answered, sounding tired. "Lisa, it's Arlen Williams. The Marcus Johnson case. The photo array shown to the victim. Did your client have his glasses on in the photo?" A pause, rustling papers. "Yes, Your Honor, he always wears them. It's in his medical record for astigmatism." And the victim's description to police. Did she mention the suspect wearing glasses? A longer pause. "No, Your Honor, the report doesn't reflect that." Another piece clicked. A suspect committing a burglary might pull up a hoodie. Would he stop to put on glasses if he didn't need them, or take them off if he did? It was a dissonance. a small crack in the foundation of the case. "I'm granting the motion to reduce bail," Judge Williams heard himself say. "Effective immediately. Reset it to $5,000, recognizance with ankle monitoring approved." It was a drastic slash. It would raise eyebrows in the DA's office. "Your Honor, that's thank you," Lisa stammered, surprised. "Don't thank me yet," he said, his eyes on the rain-streaked window. "The identification is shaky. I want a hearing on its reliability next week. Subpoena the officer who conducted the array and find out if there's any other evidence, neighbors' ring cameras, anything from the 2 blocks around." He was stepping far outside his normal role. Judges don't investigate, they adjudicate. But the image of that lemonade stand wouldn't leave him. He hung up and sat in the darkening room. He had just intervened in a case on his docket based on a child's roadside testimony. It was potentially improper. It was definitely unprecedented. And for the first time in a long time, the heavy cloak of judicial detachment felt less like duty and more like a sin. Across town, Maya packed up her stand with Ms. Miller's help, her fingers clutching the judge's cash. $1,000 still felt like a mountain, but she'd climbed a foothill today. She didn't know the man in the suit had just cut the mountain in half. She didn't know that her 25-cent cups of lemonade had just triggered a judicial review. She just knew a stranger had listened. And at that moment, in a cell in the county jail, Marcus Johnson was staring at a concrete wall, praying his little girl was someplace safe and dry, utterly unaware that the judge in his case had just left a $30 tip at a lemonade stand and was now, quietly, beginning to dismantle the case against him. But the system has inertia, and the district attorney's office, notified of the bail reduction, saw not a potential miscarriage of justice, but a judge overstepping. They prepared to fight back. The battle for Marcus Johnson's freedom was no longer just in a courtroom. It had begun on a rainy street corner, and now it was heading straight for a collision no one could predict. The call from the district attorney's office came at 8 the next morning. It wasn't a question, it was a warning. "Judge Williams, this is Ada Carson. We're filing an emergency motion to vacate your bail order in State v. Johnson. We consider the reduction, based on an asterisk ex parte communication, a gross judicial overreach." The assistant district attorney's voice was clipped, professional, and cold. Ex parte asterisk, a legal term meaning a communication with one side without the other. They had found out about the lemonade stand. Of course they had. In a small county, a judge stopping his car is a spectator sport. "My interaction with the defendant's daughter was not a legal communication, Counselor," Williams replied, his voice even. "It was a citizen observing a child in distress. My review of the case file, which is my duty, raised legitimate concerns." "Your asterisk duty is to remain impartial," Carson shot back. "The defense is already spinning this as judicial sympathy. We're requesting you recuse yourself from any further proceedings." They were moving to push him off the case. If they succeeded, any judge replacing him would likely reinstate the original bail, cementing the shaky ID, and Marcus would sink back into the system's hold. The lemonade stand money, the reduced bail, it would all be for nothing. But Williams had anticipated the pushback. "File your motion," he said, "and I'll see you at the reliability hearing next Thursday. Subpoenas have been issued." He hung up before the Ada could respond. The system was designed to correct its own errors slowly, if at all. Now it was turning to defend itself against a correction that came too fast. For Maya, the next morning brought a miracle. Her aunt burst into Ms. Miller's living room, phone in hand, tears streaming. They reduced the bail, $5,000, your daddy, coming home. The bondsman, with the judge's unexpected $30 and Maya's persistent $70, finally agreed to post the bond. The 10% fee was now $500. They were still short, but the bondsman, a weary man named Ray who'd seen too many stories end badly, looked at Maya's tally sheet at the Ziploc bag of change and sighed. "I'll front the rest. You pay me back. $20 a month." It was a charity he couldn't afford, but the story of the judge had already become a minor legend in the courthouse hallway, and Ray decided he wanted to be on the right side of it. That afternoon, Marcus Johnson walked out of the county jail, squinting in the daylight, an ankle monitor strapped to his leg. He hugged his daughter so tightly she thought her ribs would crack. He smelled of industrial soap and concrete. "My brave girl," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick. "My brave, brave girl." But the monitor on his ankle was a constant, heavy reminder. He was not free. He was on loan, and the hearing in 7 days would determine if he went back. In his chambers, Judge Williams prepared for war. He called in a favor from an old law school friend, now a professor specializing in eyewitness memory and identification procedures. "I need you to review this packet, Sandra. Tell me if this array was suggestive, if the procedure was clean." Professor Sandra Vance's report came back in 48 hours. It was devastating. The photo array shown to Mrs. Green violated 2 of the Justice Department's recommended best practices. Marcus Johnson was the only person in the six-pack wearing distinctive, thick-rimmed glasses. The filler photos, while similar in complexion and age, had markedly different facial structures. "This array," Vance wrote, "is inherently suggestive. It primes the witness to select the individual with the most memorable feature, the glasses, which, according to the police report, the perpetrator was not described as wearing. The 70% confidence rating is functionally meaningless under these conditions." It was the ammunition Williams needed, but the DA's office was mobilizing its own arsenal. They located Mrs. Green, the victim, and had a victim's advocate gently prepare her to testify. They emphasized her trauma, her certainty. They did not mention the glasses. The day before the hearing, a detective from the burglary unit, Officer Benoit, appeared in Williams's chambers, looking uncomfortable. He was the one who had conducted the photo array. "You subpoenaed me, Your Honor," Benoit said, standing rigidly. "Sit, detective. This isn't an inquisition. I just want to understand the process. The Johnson array, who put it together?" "I did, sir. Standard procedure, pulled from the database based on the description." "And the description was tall, thin black man in a dark hoodie, correct?" "Yes, sir." "So why," Williams asked, leaning forward, "of the 6 men in that array, was Marcus Johnson the only one wearing prominent glasses?" Officer Benoit shifted in his seat. The description didn't include glasses, but it didn't exclude them either. He wears them in his DMV photo. We don't alter photos. But you select the filler photos. You chose 5 other men who were not wearing glasses. You made the glasses the standout feature. Did you consider that might lead the witness? "It's not our job to lead the witness, Your Honor. It's our job to present a fair array." Benoit's defense was rote, but his eyes flickered with a hint of doubt. He was a good cop, perhaps realizing a mistake made in the routine rush of a busy week. "A fair array," Williams repeated softly. "Your victim was 70% confident. Would she have been 70% confident if the man she picked was the only one in the lineup with a beard or a scar?" Benoit had no answer. The hearing was a stark, fluorescent-lit theater of tension. On one side, public defender Lisa Gutierrez, armed with Professor Vance's report and the detective's testimony. On the other, Ada Carson, armed with the victim's tearful, steadfast identification and the raw fear of a break-in. Mrs. Green, tiny and frail on the witness stand, pointed a trembling finger at Marcus. "That's him. I'll never forget his face." Her voice broke. "He was in my home." From the gallery, Maya squeezed her father's hand. Marcus stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Then Gutierrez approached. "Mrs. Green, thank you for your testimony. Can you describe the man you saw again for the court?" "He was tall, thin, wearing a dark hoodie pulled up." "Did you see his eyes clearly?" Not really. The hood was up." "Did you see if he was wearing glasses?" A pause. Mrs. Green's eyes clouded with confusion. Glasses? No, I don't think so. Gutierrez held up the photo array. This is the set of pictures Detective Benoit showed you. Can you point to the man you identified? Mrs. Green pointed to Marcus's photo without hesitation. And can you tell the court what, in that picture, made you sure it was him? The old woman leaned forward, peering. His face, the shape of it. Not his glasses. I don't remember the glasses. It was the crack. Gutierrez didn't need to hammer it. She entered Professor Vance's report into evidence. She called Detective Benoit, who, under oath, confirmed the composition of the array. The foundation of the state's case, the eyewitness ID, was now visibly cracking in open court. But Ada Carson had a countermove. In his redirect, he stood. Your Honor, the defense has put the asterisk procedure on trial, not the identification. Mrs. Green is certain. The defendant matches the description. We have a victim in fear, and we have a judge who has already shown improper bias. He turned and looked directly at Maya, sitting in the front row. A bias that may have been influenced by an emotional appeal outside this courtroom. The air left the room. Carson was making the lemonade stand, and the judge's compassion into a weapon. Judge Williams felt a cold anger. That's enough, counselor. You will not comment on spectators in my courtroom. With all due respect, Your Honor, it goes to the heart of our motion for recusal. Your interaction with the defendant's family creates an appearance of impropriety that undermines the entire process. The hearing had just exploded into a constitutional crisis. The question was no longer just about Marcus Johnson's guilt. It was about whether the judge presiding over his case could be fair. The DA's office was willing to torch the entire proceeding to protect a win. Williams recessed the hearing. In his chambers, he stared at the law books lining the walls. The safe, predictable path was to recuse himself, to let the case be reassigned. It would be the end of his involvement and likely the end of Marcus's chance for a fair shake. A new judge, wary of the controversy, would likely admit the ID and let the case proceed to trial. The system would reassert its inertia. But the other path, to deny the recusal motion to stay on the case, was a minefield. Any ruling in Marcus's favor would be appealed as bias. His career, his reputation, could be collateral damage. As he wrestled with the decision, his clerk buzzed in. Your Honor, there's a man here to see you, a private investigator. He says it's urgent about the Johnson case. A man in a worn leather jacket entered, holding a tablet. Judge Williams, my name is Derek Hill. I was hired anonymously to look into the burglary on Maple Avenue. I think you should see this. He played a video on the tablet. It was timestamped the day of the burglary, from a doorbell camera 2 houses down from Mrs. Green. The footage showed a figure in a dark hoodie approaching a side window. The figure was tall, thin. He used a pry bar on the window latch. Then, as he turned, the camera caught a clear, 3-second shot of his face as he looked up and down the street. It was not Marcus Johnson. The man had a goatee, a tattoo snaking up his neck, and no glasses. I ran this through some contacts, Hill said. That's Leon Skip Watkins. He's got a sheet for B&Es. He's been active in the South Side for months. Cops have been looking for him. Judge Williams felt a surge of vindication so potent it was dizzying. This was the pivot. This was the hard, exonerating evidence that went beyond a flawed ID. Maya had been right. The system had been wrong, and he had been right to push. But then the pie's next words turned the victory to ice. The thing is, Judge, the cops had this footage. The homeowner gave it to the responding officers the day after the burglary. It was in the original evidence log. Williams's blood ran cold. What? It was logged, Hill confirmed, pulling a copy of the evidence sheet from his jacket. Item 14, digital video file from 221 Maple Avenue, but it was never reviewed. It was never entered into the discovery packet given to the defense. This was no longer a mistake. This was suppression, a Brady violation. the unconstitutional hiding of evidence that could exonerate a defendant. It was the worst kind of prosecutorial misconduct. Williams now held a ticking bomb. He had definitive proof of Marcus's innocence and proof that the system had not just failed, but had actively buried the truth. To reveal it would trigger an internal affairs investigation, likely get the case thrown out, and expose the DA's office to a massive civil lawsuit. But the DA's office didn't know he had it, and they were still coming for him, attacking his integrity to cover for their own negligence or worse. He looked at the pie. Who hired you? The man shook his head. Anonymous donor, said to follow the evidence and bring it straight to you if I found anything. He paused. Said you were the only one in the building who might actually care. Judge Williams knew then what he had to do. The hearing was set to reconvene in 1 hour. The DA was expecting a ruling on his recusal motion. They were confident, aggressive. Williams had the evidence to end the case and clear Marcus's name forever. But if he presented it now, in open court, it would be a declaration of war against the entire power structure he was a part of. It would burn every bridge, end his career on the bench, and turn him from an impartial judge into a whistleblower. He thought of Maya's determined face in the rain. He thought of Marcus's lost days in a cell. He thought of the video, sitting in an evidence locker, ignored. The bailiff knocked. Court is ready, Your Honor. Judge Williams took the tablet, straightened his robe, and walked toward the courtroom door. In one hand, he held the power to deliver justice. In the other, he held the match that could ignite a scandal capable of burning down his entire professional life. He had to choose which to use first. Judge Williams walked back into a courtroom holding two truths. One would free an innocent man. The other would destroy the careful fiction of a perfectly functioning system. He took the bench. The air was electric. Ada Carson looked smug, anticipating a recusal. Public Defender Gutierrez looked resigned. Marcus Johnson stared at the floor, his hand still clasping Maya's. Before we address the motion for recusal, Williams began, his voice echoing in the silent room, I have received new evidence. Critical evidence that was in the possession of the state and never disclosed to the defense. A ripple went through the gallery. Carson shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We've received no notice. You're receiving notice now, Counselor, Williams said, his gaze level. Bailiff, please connect this tablet to the courtroom monitor. As the video from the doorbell camera played, the entire case unraveled in 3 seconds of pixelated clarity. The man with the goatee and neck tattoo, the pry bar, the clear, unmistakable face that was not Marcus Johnson's. Marcus made a small, choked sound. Maya whispered, Daddy, and hugged his arm tightly. Ada Carson was pale. This footage was not considered probative. It was from 2 houses down. It doesn't exonerate. It does more than exonerate, Mr. Carson, Williams interrupted, his voice cold. It identifies the actual perpetrator, a man named Leon Watkins, with a known history for this exact crime. And according to the chain of custody document I have here, this video was logged into evidence by the responding officers the day after the burglary. Item 14. Yet it never appeared in discovery. Can you explain why exculpatory evidence was withheld from the defense? The Brady violation, the nuclear term in criminal law, it hung in the air. Carson stammered, there must have been an oversight in the evidence room, a misfiling. A misfiling, Williams repeated. He let the silence stretch. This misfiling led to an innocent man spending 6 days in jail. It led to a $10,000 bail. It led to his 8-year-old daughter standing in the rain for 72 hours trying to buy his freedom. He looked at Carson, then at the court reporter. I am dismissing all charges against Mr. Marcus Johnson with prejudice. The ankle monitor is to be removed immediately. And I am referring this matter to the State Attorney General's office and the Office of Professional Responsibility for investigation into potential prosecutorial misconduct and evidence suppression. The gavel fell, it was over. For Marcus and Maya, it was a whirlwind of tears and disbelieving laughter. The bailiff cut the monitor from his ankle. The weight, both physical and existential, was gone. They were free, truly free. But for Arlen Williams, the wait was just beginning. The fallout was swift and professional. The district attorney, a political animal named Margaret Voss, did not call to apologize. She summoned him to her office. The meeting was brief and icy. "You've embarrassed this office, Arlen. You took what could have been an internal review and turned it into a public spectacle. You implied malice where there was, at worst, negligence." "Negligence that destroys lives is still a crime, Margaret," Williams replied. "You're not a crusader, you're a judge. Your job is to manage the process, not burn it down." She leaned forward. "The AG's investigation will be a formality. My people made a mistake. They'll be reprimanded. But you've made enemies. The police union is furious. They're saying you called Detective Benoit a liar on the stand. They're talking about recall petitions." "Let them talk," Williams said, but he felt the ground shifting beneath him. The system was a club, and he had just broken the first rule. You don't expose the club's failures to the public. The attack came not through legal channels, but through political ones. A week later, a local news blog known for its tough-on-crime stance published a story. "Activist judge uses child's lemonade stand to spring felon." It twisted the narrative completely. Judge Williams's compassion was recast as emotional manipulation. The exonerating video was a footnote. The focus was on his ex parte communication, the alleged bias. It quoted anonymous court sources, saying he had a history of being soft on crime. Then came the phone call from the Commission on Judicial Conduct. A complaint had been filed. They needed to discuss the appearance of impropriety regarding his contact with the defendant's minor child. He was now the one under investigation. Meanwhile, the anonymous donor who hired the private investigator was revealed. It was a local civil rights nonprofit, the Equal Justice Project. They had been tracking the case. Their director, a formidable woman named Anya Chen, called Williams. "Judge, we want to file a federal civil rights lawsuit on behalf of Marcus Johnson. False arrest, malicious prosecution, emotional distress. We want to name the officers, the DA's office. We need your testimony about the withheld evidence." Williams hesitated. Testifying in a lawsuit against the county he served would be the final, irreparable break. It would validate every accusation his enemies were making. "I'll think about it," he said. But the universe, it seemed, was not done with the story of the lemonade stand. The video of Leon Skip Watkins didn't just exonerate Marcus. It gave the police a perfect face to chase. They picked up Watkins 3 days later, trying to pawn a jewelry box taken from another South Side home. In his apartment, they found loot from 3 other burglaries, including a distinctive silver locket belonging to Mrs. Green. When confronted with the Maple Avenue footage, Watkins, looking for a deal, confessed not just to that burglary, but to 4 others in the same month. A spree the police had not connected. And in a stunning twist, he offered something else. "That old lady's place on Maple. Yeah, that was me. Easy window. But the cops, they didn't seem too interested in looking for me once they had their guy." The public defender assigned to Watkins relayed this to Anya Chen. It was the "wait, it gets worse" moment. This wasn't just an oversight. This was tunnel vision so severe it bordered on deliberate. The police had their suspect in Marcus, a man with no record, an alibi, and glasses, and they stopped looking. The video wasn't just misfiled. It was ignored because it didn't fit the narrative they'd already built. Anya brought this to Williams. "It's a pattern, Judge. It's not one bad apple. It's a barrel that spoils the fruit. We have to go public with this." Williams thought of the commission hearing. He thought of the blog posts. He thought of his quiet, respected career, now teetering on the edge. Then he thought of Maya asking him if the glasses mattered. She had seen the truth with childish clarity. The adults in charge had chosen not to. He made his decision. He agreed to provide a sworn affidavit for the federal lawsuit. He would testify to the chain of custody, the Brady violation, and the professional retaliation he was now facing for exposing it. The affidavit was filed. It was a thunderclap. The local newspaper, The Respectable One, picked up the story. Judge alleges evidence suppression in wrongful arrest case, faces ethics complaint. The narrative flipped again. Now Williams wasn't an activist judge. He was a potential whistleblower being punished for doing his job too well. The public reaction was immediate and divided. Some saw a hero, others saw a traitor to law and order. But for Marcus and Maya Johnson, life was slowly reassembling. Marcus got his job back at the assisted living facility. The story of the lemonade stand had made him a minor local celebrity in the best way. Families on his street now brought their kids to meet him, to see the man whose daughter loved him so fiercely. One evening, Maya set up her lemonade stand again, not in the rain, on a sunny Saturday. The sign now read, "Thank you lemonade, 25 cents. Judge Williams, driving home from a long, fraught meeting with his own attorney about the ethics complaint, saw it. He stopped again. This time a small crowd was there. Neighbors, kids from Maya's school. They were buying cups, not out of charity, but out of solidarity. Maya saw him and beamed. She poured him a cup and ran over to his car window. "No charge for you, Judge Williams," she said, handing it to him. He took it. "How's your dad?" "He's good, he's home." She said it with a finality that made his heart ache. Such a simple thing. He's home. The entire purpose of the justice system reduced to a child's three-word verdict. As he drove away, sipping the tart, sweet lemonade, his phone buzzed. It was Anya Chen from the Equal Justice Project. "Arlen, we've been reviewing the other burglaries Watkins confessed to. In 2 of them, the defendants are still pending. 1 took a plea deal. The evidence against them is even thinner than it was against Marcus. We think this might be bigger. We think there might be a pattern of closing cases fast with the easiest suspect, not the right one." Williams pulled over, the lemonade cup condensation cold in his hand. It wasn't over. Freeing Marcus wasn't the end. It was the crack that revealed the fault line. A single act of kindness at a rainy lemonade stand had not just freed one man. It had accidentally pulled a thread, and now the whole tapestry of the local justice system was beginning to unravel. He looked in the rearview mirror at the receding sight of the yellow stand, the smiling girl. His career was in jeopardy. His reputation was being shredded. But for the first time, he felt no regret, only a grim, determined clarity. He had started this by listening to a child. Now he had to see it through, no matter the cost. The battle for one man's freedom was won. The war for the soul of the system had just begun. The hearing before the Judicial Conduct Commission was held in a sterile conference room, not a courtroom. There were no spectators, no dramatic speeches. Just 3 commissioners reviewing a file that contained a child's lemonade stand, a buried video, and a judge's career. Judge Williams's defense was simple. He presented a timeline, the lemonade stand encounter, his subsequent independent review of the case file, the discovery of the discrepancy in the eyewitness identification, his lawful order for a hearing, then the receipt of the suppressed evidence from a third party. At every point, he argued, he had acted not as an activist, but as a judge duty-bound to ensure a fair trial. "My communication with the child was human," he stated calmly. "My actions afterward were judicial. To conflate the two is to suggest judges must be blind to the human consequences of their dockets. We are not. We cannot be." The commission deliberated for 3 weeks. The wait was its own punishment. The local media cycle moved on, but in the legal community, sides were drawn. Some colleagues avoided him in the hallways. Others quietly bought him coffee and said, "You did the right thing." The ruling, when it came, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic balance. They found no ethical violation. His review of the file was appropriate. His order for a hearing was within his discretion. However, they strongly cautioned against future informal communications that could create an appearance of partiality. It was a slap on the wrist wrapped in a victory. He kept his robe, but the stain on his reputation in certain circles was permanent. The federal civil rights lawsuit, however, was a different arena. With Judge Williams's affidavit and the confession of the real burglar, Leon Watkins, the Equal Justice Project built a devastating case. They didn't just sue for Marcus Johnson. They filed a class action suit on behalf of the other two men Watkins had confessed to burglarizing, men who had been arrested based on similarly thin evidence. The city settled. 6 months after the dismissal of charges, Marcus Johnson received a check for $450,000. The other two men received lesser but life-changing amounts. The settlement mandated no admission of guilt from the police or DA's office, but it required 3 concrete changes: mandatory Brady violation training for all prosecutors, an independent audit of the evidence room's logging procedures, and the creation of a conviction integrity unit to review past cases. For Marcus, the money was a surreal blessing. He paid off debt, he set up a college fund for Maya, he bought a reliable car, but the true wealth was intangible. He could look police officers in the eye again without fear. He could sleep through the night. Maya, now 9, became a quiet celebrity at her school. She was the girl who freed her dad with lemonade. She used her newfound platform for a 4th-grade science fair project titled The Cost of Freedom: Why Eyewitnesses Can Be Wrong. It won first prize. One Saturday, Judge Williams received an invitation in the mail, not to a legal function, to a barbecue, at the Johnsons' small rented house. He almost didn't go. The relationship between a judge and a former defendant was still fraught, but he went. It was an ordinary, beautiful afternoon. Kids ran through a sprinkler. The smell of charcoal and burgers filled the air. Marcus shook his hand, a firm, strong grip. "Thank you for coming, Judge." "Call me Arlen," Williams said. "I'm not on the bench today." Maya ran up and handed him a cup of lemonade. "From the new batch," she said proudly. "It was perfect." He sat in a lawn chair, watching this family he had helped reassemble. He felt a peace he hadn't known in years. This was the payoff. Not the legal victory, not the settled lawsuit, but this. A man grilling burgers in his own backyard, his daughter laughing, the shadow of the cell forever behind him. But the story had one final, surprising chapter. The anonymous donor who funded the private investigator was never publicly revealed. Anya Chen at the Equal Justice Project kept the secret. One evening, she invited Judge Williams for coffee. "The donor wants to meet you, now that everything's settled." She drove him to a modest retirement community on the outskirts of town. They were led to a small, neat apartment. Sitting in an armchair by the window was Mrs. Evelyn Green, the burglary victim. Williams was stunned. The woman whose mistaken identification had started the nightmare. She was frailer than in court, but her eyes were sharp. "Judge Williams," she said, "sit, please." He sat. "Mrs. Green, I didn't expect." "I know," she said softly. "After the trial, after I saw that video, I couldn't sleep. I had put an innocent man in jail. My fear did that." She looked down at her hands. "The police, they were so sure. They showed me that picture and I wanted to be sure too. I wanted the bad man caught, but I picked the wrong one." She had sold a piece of property she'd inherited, she explained. She used the money to hire the investigator, hoping against hope he'd find something to clear the man she'd wrongly accused. She couldn't bear to attach her name to it. The shame was too great, but she had to try to make it right. "The money from the lawsuit," she said, "it came from the city, but the truth came from me. I needed you to know that." Judge Williams was speechless. The victim had become the unsung hero of the exoneration. The system had failed everyone: Marcus, Maya, Mrs. Green. But this elderly woman, in her guilt and grace, had reached across the divide her mistake created and helped fix what was broken. It was the most profound lesson in justice. he had ever received. The ripples of the case continued. The new Conviction Integrity Unit, staffed by a skeptical defense attorney and a retired detective, began its work. Their first review of a 5-year-old drug conviction based on a single, since-discredited officer's testimony led to an exoneration, then another. Judge Williams, though he'd won his ethics hearing, found himself increasingly assigned to civil cases, not criminal ones. A quiet sidelining. He didn't fight it. Instead, he began volunteering his legal expertise with the Equal Justice Project, advising on systemic reform. He found the work more fulfilling than any high-profile criminal trial. On the 1-year anniversary of the day Marcus was released, Maya set up her lemonade stand one more time. This time, the sign read, "Lemonade for Justice, all proceeds to the Equal Justice Project." Judge Williams, now just Arlen to the Johnsons, was there, handing out cups. So was Mrs. Green, sitting in a folding chair under an umbrella, smiling shyly. A local reporter came and took a picture. It ran in the Sunday paper. The judge, the wrongfully accused man, his daughter, and the victim who helped free him, all together at a cardboard stand. The caption called it a portrait of repair. The system hadn't been destroyed. It had been forced to bend just a little. A man was free. A child learned her voice mattered. A victim found redemption. And a judge remembered why he put on the robe in the first place. No single story fixes a broken system. But sometimes, a single story proves the broken parts can still be mended by the people moving through it. It starts when someone decides to look and to care, and to stop their car in the rain. So what does the story of a lemonade stand in a rainstorm actually teach us about justice? It shows us that the machinery of law is not some distant, flawless engine. It is made of people. People who can be rushed, or tired, or blinded by the desire for a closed case. And people who can choose in a single moment to look closer. Maya's stand was more than a fundraiser. It was a signal flare, a declaration that someone was missing and that his absence mattered. Judge Williams's decision to stop was more than curiosity. It was an act of engagement with the human consequence of his docket, and Mrs. Green's anonymous quest for the truth was the ultimate act of repair, a victim reclaiming her own moral agency. This story sits at the intersection of two devastating statistics. First, that eyewitness misidentification plays a role in nearly 70% of wrongful convictions that are later overturned. And second, that for the millions of children with an incarcerated parent, the trauma of separation can alter the course of their lives. Maya's story is the human face of both those numbers. Real change is rarely a single, sweeping reform. It is often the accumulation of small corrections. A judge reviewing a file with fresh eyes, a victim funding a search for truth, a community buying lemonade in solidarity. These acts create pressure points that can, over time, bend a system toward its better self. The lemonade stand is gone now, but its legacy isn't just Marcus Johnson's freedom or the new Conviction Review Unit. It's a reminder that justice is not a passive state we receive. It is an active condition we build day by day, choice by choice. It requires us to be, like Maya, stubborn in our hope, like Judge Williams, willing to question our own protocols, and like Mrs. Green, brave enough to help fix a mistake we played a part in. If this story of courage and consequence resonated with you, consider subscribing to our channel. We dedicate ourselves to sharing narratives that don't just entertain, but illuminate the profound choices that define our shared humanity. Tap the like button if you believe every system needs people willing to stop their car in the rain. What moment in this story stayed with you the most? Was it Maya's determination, the judge's risk, or the victim's quiet redemption? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and truly value this conversation. Thank you for listening. Remember, the most powerful forces for change are often the simplest: to see someone, to ask a question, and to choose not to look away. Until next time.